Hello everyone and welcome to our seminar series From Single to Mingle in just under 30 seconds, the how-tos in deciphering the dating code. I'm very excited as your televised seminar won the Monty Awards for the best produced show in the educational category. Now the Monty's Award recognizes producers who constantly bring in creative content in different categories for TV shows. It's like the Academy Awards for producers. Now, my mission is to continue providing great, valuable content to my audience, the viewers at home, and of course, invite the best of the best guest panelists in the DMV area. All this couldn't happen with the help of my amazing TV crew at the studio. A big round of applause for them. Now, in our seminars, our guest panelists and myself work very hard in covering all topics related to dating and relationship in the 21st century, and primarily focusing on providing you with the tools needed to be successful in your journey to finding your soulmate. Now, many of you probably came across my TV show, The HappyNess Journey with Dr. Dan, where I invite guests from all walks of life to share their journeys in overcoming difficult challenges in their lives and managing to keeping moving forward, despite the hurdles. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's seminar. I have a doctorate degree in organizational leadership and communication with a minor in quantum physics. I'm also a practicing therapist covering issues such as self-esteem, weight and anger management, and also do marital and relationship counseling. I do individual and group therapy as well. Now, for more information, you can contact me at the number below. Now, it is time to introduce our guest for today's seminar. Now, all experts will have the time to share their expertise and education with all of the 800,000 Montgomery County residents and also our live audience. Now, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Now, can you please start with Bob Paff? Give us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Bob Paff. I live in Baltimore City. I've been married and divorced twice. I have 6 children. I wrote a best-selling book on communication in 2015 and speak and travel all over the world, really sharing my life experiences and trying to help others as they travel through their own.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Robin.
I'm Robin Brannon. I'm a licensed clinical marriage and family therapist practicing in Kensington. I've been practicing in Montgomery County for since 2001.
Okay.
I've been practicing in Montgomery
So let's go
County.
17 years.
That's right. And I see individuals, children and adults, couples and families at Better Together Family Therapy in Kensington.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. Mr. Dave.
Hi, Dan. Great to be back again. Thank you very much. My name is Dave Elliott. I am a relationship coach, an author. I work with singles and couples, but I guess my specialty is working with smart, amazing women all over the globe, helping them understand men a lot more effectively so that they can bring out the best in men rather than suffering through the worst. Oh. And I'm just glad to be here. Thank you very much.
So bring the best out of men. What about women?
I said my clients are amazing.
Okay, good. Good comeback. Nikki.
I'm Nikki Nardo. I am owner and the coach of Prepare to Be Pursued. I'm a dating preparation coach. So I offer services to help women, again, get back out there. Essentially, women that have been out of the dating game and have doubts about their next relationship. I get them ready to have the confidence to pursue the love life that they want. I am a certified professional project manager and also a certified professional coach.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for being here today. As you know, we're going to be talking about the do's and don'ts after divorce and how to move on, etc. So let's get started. I'm going to ask questions to all of you. You can all join in and just give your feedback. Either you approve or disapprove. Let's start with you, Bob. Now, after divorce, how do you know that you're ready to be able to take the step forward to move on in your life?
Wow, doesn't that question sort of frame everything? You know, the most important person, I think, and I tell people, Dan, that you can communicate with is yourself. And I don't know that we really do a very good job of that. As a matter of fact, I would argue that we don't do a very good job of that. So the first thing I would suggest that people do is step back, you know, because it's a traumatic time. It's a traumatic loss. You have to get used to yourself. How did I make these mistakes? Why did I make them? You've gotta get to know yourself all over again, and you've also got to heal. So I think the most important thing that you need to do when you've come out of a divorce situation is really to step back and to breathe and recalibrate and just, relax. Too often we panic, we want to jump into the next relationship, right?
Yeah.
We want to make the
Bouncing.
next mistake,
Yes.
bounce into something because we're frantic and all those things. And I would just tell people to relax and breathe.
Okay, excellent. Now I know, Nikki, that you do have a similar question when it comes to ready to date again. Now, what is your feedback on this one?
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more with what was just shared. It's been my experience with the women that I work with, the clients that I have around this, where they do exactly that. They're frantic, and they immediately want to get out and dating. They're like, Nikki, how do I get out there? Where are the men? Let me get to the
Where are
men.
the men?
And my response is always, that's always a red flag for me. That, have you really done your work? Are you clear about the fact that there could be things that you might need to visit and change? A lot of times the women are not aware that there are things that they can be doing differently because it's so traumatic. They feel like something's been done to them, rather than investigating the things that they've done that likely could have contributed to the results of the marriage. So.
Okay. Now, Robin, how do you go in, as you, especially after divorce, you feel that you've made a mistake of choosing the wrong partner. So how do you avoid making that same mistake again?
That's a really great question, and I think it speaks to what the other panelists have said as well. The healing piece is extremely important. Being self-reflective, going back and considering what you've done that contributed to the challenges in the relationship, making sure that you've got strong listening skills, that you're able to self-soothe when you're upset about something. Those are extremely important skills. And doing the change that you need to do. Go into therapy if you feel that you need to. If you're really experiencing a lot of emotional distress about the loss, you absolutely need to process that and make those changes yourself individually. I was saying to them earlier that if you've dismantled a relationship, you've taken apart a jigsaw puzzle with 2 pieces in it.
I love that.
And if you don't change the shape of your piece of the puzzle, you're going to get right back into the same puzzle again. So you really
Interesting
need
analogy.
to adjust the shape of that puzzle piece so that you can find a different kind of partnership.
Interesting. Now, Dave, what are the 3 elements you look for a relationship, and that will be a critical, long-lasting one, especially after dating? When you date after divorce, you bounce from one to the other because you feel that this person is not, exactly what you're looking for. So let's go to the next one and next one. So what are the 3 elements that you would think would be crucial for a long-lasting relationship?
Let me just start by adding one other thing to what.
Yes,
to
please
I
go
agree
ahead.
with everything you said, and I wanted to add, I think, about changing your puzzle piece, and on the other side of that relationship, I think when you can come away with gratitude for the lessons you learned, for who you are, and walk away with your head held high, and you're not feeling shame or guilt about any of that, and you feel like you're ready to move on. That's like a key that says you've processed it and you're ready to move forward. In terms of the things that would make a sustainable relationship, I would look for similar values. I think that's key. People who have similar things in common and have similar goals, things that they want, the same things. And I would say that the important piece is looking for someone who is willing to, you're going to grow and you're going to shift and you're going to change over time. But I think someone who has the desire to grow and shift with their partner, so that you understand. And it's one of those things where we're going to move through time. If you're talking about moving together, being together for 20 or 30 years, people are going to grow at different rates and changes. And I think it's a commitment to just love that person, see the best in them, even when they're not always showing up at their very best in that moment, but still being able to see the best in them. So I think that's a pretty important aspect of it as well.
Interesting. So this is basically a question for all 4 of you. What kind of advice would you give to someone if they cannot assume their responsibility to say that it was their fault, that they will always point fingers at everyone else?
Run like hell?
The demise, about the demise of their relationship or their divorce, exactly.
Listen, as Nikki said, we all contribute to the success or failure of a relationship. When my relationships failed, I wanted to know why. What could I have done differently? And so I think you have to do the deep dive and figure out. We live in, Gandhi said this years ago, and I was happy to hear he said it when it was in my book. Before I found out he said it, we live in fear. We're paralyzed by fear. We're afraid of confrontation. We're afraid of success. We're afraid of,
failure.
so many things. And we need to get over that. And I think we need to, I didn't date for 2 years after my relationship ended. I needed, as I told Robin earlier, I needed a break. You know, Groucho Marx said, I love my cigar, but I take it out of my mouth every now and then. I just needed a break, and I needed to breathe, and again, and I'm a very spiritual guy. I think we also, and you guys would hopefully agree, we need to seek out the other things that soothe and heal us, as Robin said. And we just don't really do a very good job of getting to know ourselves. And so you do need to own that, because you contributed on some level to the success or failure of that relationship, and I want to know what it is before I dive into the next one.
Okay. Dave, any feedback on this one?
Yes, I totally agree. I would also say emotional maturity, to be able to take a step back and say, I think the mark of an incredible person and a potential partner is if they can ask the question, what was my role in that? Instead of, here's what you did wrong. Someone who's pointing the finger all the time has three pointing back, you know. And so I think that's just key. If you can say, what was my role in that? Because then you're not all in it, but you're also reflective, and you're trying to learn from it. And if you can distance it, just say, you know, how did I contribute? It's not all everybody's fault. It's you know, it's always going to be a collection of each person is going to contribute. So if you can step back and look at it and say, you know, is that the man I want to be? Or is that the woman that I want to be? Am I proud of how I showed up in that moment? I think if you can ask those questions, I think those are real indicators of an emotional maturity. And I think that says that you're built to stand the test of time, I think, a lot more than someone who is always, you know, pointing the finger. I think that's incredibly important.
Robin?
Yeah. So once again, of course, I agree with the other panelists, but I think as a mental health professional, what I notice is there are certain circumstances where it's really easy to point the finger at the other person, especially if there's been violence in the relationship, if there's been substance abuse, if there's been a serious breach of trust. And I think what people don't often realize is that those are relational dynamics also. Even though there may be an individual who seems to have perpetuated a particular behavior or suffered from a particular symptom that really had an impact on the relationship, your partnership with that person also had an impact. And those are the times when you really need the help of a licensed mental health professional to change those patterns. Patterns around domestic violence, patterns around substance abuse don't change on their own, and they don't change just by reading
they don't
a book.
disappear.
You really need professional support to be able to change those patterns.
Beautiful. So Nikki, what do you do when you cannot get closure after divorce and you still feel that this negativity lingers inside of you and that stops you from going on dates? What do you do? I mean, besides getting, of course, help from licensed psychologists or therapists, what are the other strategies that you would suggest?
So what I've seen with my clients around that is they've done some work, they've sought help with therapy and things like that, but there's still that angst when it comes to opening themselves up to the next relationship. And a lot of times they may have thought they were over it until I do my discovery work with them to kind of figure out, like, where are you really? Where are you really? We get in deep. And they discover that, you know, a lot of the fear that was talked about earlier is still there about what happened. You know, there's some lingering questions. This wasn't my choice. You know, I didn't choose this. How do I get past, and then you know, the questions come up. How do I get past this in order to move on and open up? And my approach to that is really to get deep on the fear itself, and just remove that obstacle. And you'll be surprised, you know, if someone has done the preliminary work, you'll be surprised how quickly they can see changes in their life when you get clear about the root of what's keeping someone from advancing, and then just attacking that. You know, you'll be surprised how quickly a person could see some drastic changes. So
interesting. Well, thank you. Now, Bob, at what point when you start dating after divorce do you express what you want in your new relationship? I mean, do you feel that the other person will say, well, he's too demanding? How do you express it?
It's a great question, and I can only speak to this personally. And again, I talk about the book. It's my personal journey. I like to do that early on. I really do, and it goes back to we need to be careful of the dialogue and the words we choose, and not pointing that finger at other people. I think we have to express how we feel, what I want, what I'm looking for, instead of saying you don't do this or you don't give me or I think we really need to own what we want. So I like to, a couple things that folks might disagree with, and I'd love to have your thought on it, is I like to know the person's history. Because if there are red flags, I'd rather know early on in the relationship, maybe as Nikki said, this person hasn't done the work, you know? And so maybe I sort of have the PhD in emotional development and this person's in preschool. I want to know that, because if I'm willing to say, oh yeah, but they're smart, they'll figure it out, and if I've got sort of that rescue mentality, maybe I don't want to go down that road again. So to answer that question for me, Dan, I want to know pretty soon onto the relationship, because I don't want to get caught up in all the other stuff, the sexual chemistry or all the other pieces that sort of mask what we're really looking for in the quality and the substance in the relationship. So me speaking personally, I like to know those things pretty early on in the relationship, and they could be done in a constructive, you know, way. They don't have to be argumentative or attacking anybody, but you frame it in such a way that, you know, this is really what I found works for me. And then people have that option to say, well, that's not what I'm looking for. I say it all the time, nobody's wrong. You might be wrong for each other, but it doesn't make you wrong. And it's about finding that placement.
About being demanding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dave, do you have any feedback on this theory?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for that, absolutely. But it's about, I would say one of the best pieces of advice that I give is, like, I talk about a thing called the second date formula, how to get a second date, if you want one. Or I think you can go into a dating situation two different ways. You can go into it looking for what's potentially wrong, or you can go into it looking for what's potentially great about that person. So one of the things that I sort of coach my clients to do is say, basically on that date, your assignment is to go in there and find 3 to 5 things that you like or appreciate or acknowledge or respect or notice and reflect them back. And so your goal is not to get another date, your goal is to leave them better than you found them. That's your only goal. And so what that does is it also gets a lot of that mental chatter, especially with ladies, because they navigate from emotion. The feminine navigates from emotion more than masculine, which is more logical. So they tend to have that chatter in there about, oh, I don't know if I should have worn this. What is he thinking? Is he going to call? Are we going to date? Are we texting? Are we exclusive? And asking all those questions, it gets rid of that. And it just says, I want to meet this man. I want to see what's great in him. And I want to leave him better than I found him. And that's saying, wow, I really respect the fact that you volunteer with your kids, or I really respect the fact that you're connected to your family, or you're committed to your family, or you built a business. Whatever it is, find what you like, put it out there, and your goal is to simply leave them better than you found them. And I think when you do that, I think it sets it up beautifully. And I think along the way, you'll find out those things where it might be non-starters for you personally, but you still have compassionately left them further down the road than you found them. And I think that's just great dating karma.
That's a good rule.
And it's a beautiful thing. So
Yeah, it is.
that's my thought.
Thank you. Now, obviously, many are very reluctant to get into another relationship, especially after a nasty divorce. But let's say they assume that, okay, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to get into this relationship with this person. How, Robin, do you divorce-proof your next relationship? The universal question.
That is the universal question, isn't it? And
Yeah.
we have folks on this stage that are doing all kinds of different things that help people to divorce-proof those relationships. There's coaching, there's marriage enrichment, organizations like bettermarriages.org that do that for free, that you can really engage in that. You have to be willing to put in the work in the relationship. You have to be willing to do your individual healing first, as we've said again and again. And then once you're in that relationship and you're working at that relationship, make sure that you're really honoring your partner's seeking of connection. So when your partner is turning to you and looking to have a conversation with you, looking to engage with you in some way, make sure that you're open to that and available to that. We can get very busy and run from thing to thing and say, not right now, not right now, not right now to our partner. But if we're never present for that moment of connection, then we really don't have a relationship. So it's very, very important to do that, what John Gottman calls turning toward your partner in moments of potential connection.
Well, also, I'd say to Robin, to that point, one of my favorite books is The 5 Love Languages.
Yes.
If you don't know what you want, how's anybody else, how can they possibly know? And so many people I talk to really have no clue. Even they haven't read the book. They don't know really what they want and the order in which they want it. Like, which one is the most important to you? Which one's the deal breaker? As Dave said, the non-starter. You know, what are those things that are important to you? Like, I tell people now when I date, it's like, I know what I want, and I do. And it feels good, empowering at this point in my 50s to finally know, because I don't know that I did before. You know, we rush into things, children come along, life gets in the way, careers change, parents, you know, I mean, there are a lot of things going on, and we don't really take that time to say, what do I want and how do I feel and how do I express that?
Well, will it be a deal breaker if you tell them, well, my love language is quality time, and they look at you and say, huh? Would you say, okay, this person doesn't seem to know much?
I mean, I would certainly pause, as Dave was saying about, you know, if and so if there were other things in the relationship or about the person that I like, but that's where the dialogue needs to occur. So if I want physical touch in the form of when I come home every day, I want a hug. And I want it every day. And this person says, oh, I have to hug you again. I have to hug you again. And then I'm like, can you give me 3 out of 7 or 5 or whatever? And they're like, okay,
negotiate here.
okay. So we're negotiating it, but you know, to some extent.
Compromising, yes.
And then I have to decide whether or not that's okay for me. Or that's so high on that list, whatever it is, that I can live with that. And here's the thing too, be sure you can live with that. In the early stages of a relationship, everybody looks great over candles and a bottle of wine, and you look better after 2.
Yes.
You know, so just
after a few glasses of wine.
Right? You're like, your name was again? But you know, but really be sure that you can live with that.
If I could add on that, I think that's super important. And everything that you shared as far as understanding who you are, what you want, and that whether or not you can really work with something or deal with something is hugely important. And that's where I really focus and hone in on ladies. And I ask my series of questions around that, and a lot of times, I'll say 85% of the time, I've never thought about that. I don't know. And so we have to do the work, do some assessments, 5 love language, you know, personality evaluations, things like that to really have it on paper and clear for them. This is who this is who you are. Reintroduce themselves to themselves, kind of thing, so that they'll have a sense of empowerment when they're going out there meeting people. Because like you said, everyone looks great, you know, first when they're working so hard to impress and everything like that. And then before you know it, all the endorphins and everything else go down and whatever other, you know, chemical things happen when you're meeting someone new. And then you're left with a real person, and it's like, wait a minute, what did I sign up for? So understanding what you need in advance of dating, I think is even, you know, really, really super important. Like for me, for instance, when I was dating before I met my boyfriend, and I was very clear for the first time in a long time as to what I was looking for. So when I was, you know, dating someone, it was just like, okay, this isn't working. And I had the confidence to say, all right, let's go ahead and end this before it gets too far. And, you know, no hard feelings, just move on.
That's right.
And when I met my now boyfriend, it was just evident. You know, you'll know it when you see it, when you've done the work, you know, and then you can invest that time, and then you can continue to get to know them. And then, you know, it just becomes less anxiety filled when you've done that type of processing ahead of time. So it's like you've already kind of like envisioned what the situation will look like in a realistic way without going overboard.
Now, if you go back to, you mentioned that you had 6 kids, right? And all of you have any kids?
I have 2.
You do? Okay. When is the best time to introduce the kids to your new relationship? Is there like a specific, when you feel that, okay, this person is going to stay with me long time, or no one can really predict, but when do you feel that it's the good time to introduce?
You know, again, my personal experience is it's somewhat subjective, but some great advice I got from a therapist one time was, she looked at me and we were talking, and she said, Bob, don't date. And I looked at her like, what? And she said, just hang out. And I said, what? You know,
this is a new
but
term.
It was great advice. And what she said to me was, do the things that you would normally do, like if it's going to the dry cleaners or getting gas or whatever. See people as they really are, away from the candlelight and the wine and all those things. So one of the things I've incorporated, I think over the course of almost 9 years now, my children have met, I think maybe 2 people.
Okay.
And I had a tree trimming party one year, and I invited a bunch of people, and in that crowd was a woman I was dating, which was a good way to sort of introduce her into the mix. I didn't tell my children, but you get to see how people interact with each other, interact with the children. I had a date with one woman who had children, I had children. I said, we're just gonna I told my kids, you know, we're gonna come to your lacrosse practice and we're gonna go out for pizza. This woman was entirely different with me than she was around all the kids. And it was cute. My son thought she was gorgeous. He was thinking like a boy. My daughter said, Dad, she's not for you. And I said, honey, really? And so it was curious. And she said, she's just not nice enough or friendly enough or personal enough. And maybe that was a tough situation to put her in, although I didn't really think so. And I want to know that. And really kind of ended after that. So I don't want to wait too far down the road, because if there are those issues and a different person presents themselves in front of my children, I have 2 in their 30s, 2 in their 20s, and 2 teenagers, so I cover most of the spectrum. You know, I'm old enough to have a son who's been married and divorced.
Yeah.
And so it's painful seeing that when your kids go through it. But I really think, Dan, just from my perspective, it's different for everybody, but that's how I like to approach it. And it's worked for me. Because if I'm far down the road and I'm ready to marry this person, whatever, and it's a disaster with my children, because I will tell you, and I tell people when I date them, particularly if they have children, your children have to come first. I'm an adult. I don't do the jealousy thing. I'm an adult. Your children come first. My children come first. That's how I look at it. Doesn't mean, you know, we're going to have a different relationship from that. But the children have to be important, and they know they have to be valued. And, you know, it's like I'm losing dad or I'm losing mom to this person. You gotta, there's a whole process around that. It's a great question.
But do you feel it's more competitive for them that you put now attention to someone new?
Well, it could be, but I think it comes back to the communication piece. What I say, you need to, and I'll give you an example. In one of my relationships, you know, one of my wives married and didn't tell the children. And they showed up to that. And so I thought, and Robin, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I thought what's going through their minds is, if mom can do this, can dad do this? And so what I said to them is, I'm really sorry, that must have hurt. Instead of throwing mom under the bus, that's not, mom's an adult.
Yeah.
But I acknowledged and said, that must have really hurt. I'm really sorry. And just so you know, dad's not going to do that. If I find somebody and I love, it's going to be a celebration. We're not going to run off and do this.
Las Vegas.
You know, you're going to be part of it, because it'll be a celebration, and I love you. And so what I did, and Robin, hopefully as the therapist on the panel, you would agree that, you know, I wanted them to feel like, because one of the fallacies I've found, Dan, is people say all the time, kids get it and they figure it out. And I don't know that they do. I think people draw conclusions based on the data that's presented. But it could be totally off base. And if you're dealing with a person who's not stable or manipulative or whatever, that's evidence too that the kids have to process. It's very difficult for adults, let alone children, to navigate their way through these things.
Yeah. So Bob, you've hit on one of my critical rules, which is no surprises, right? You don't want to surprise your children with, hey, this is my new partner.
Yeah.
That conversation should be happening ahead of their first interaction with that person. I do disagree a little bit with the approach of exposing them in a sort of more relaxed setting first. I would try to find that out about a partner while watching them interact in a more general setting. Maybe you go to a friend's party together and you watch them interact with children there, or things like that, rather than introducing them to your children. Because I think you really need to remember that you're asking your children to allow a new person into their family, right? When they got a new sibling, they had 9 months to warm up to that, and they're still not always on board, right? So when you're bringing in a new partner, you always need to reassure them that this person is not replacing their other parent in any way. They need constant reassurance that they will not be taking your time or your love away from them. Every stage of the process, every time you have a conversation about it, lead with, I will still have the same amount of time with you, and I still have the same amount of love for you. You will always be included in this process. I love that part of what you said as well. And there will be no surprises. We're embarking on this journey as a family. It might have challenging moments. And when it does, we'll work through that together. And then I think the other thing I would say is be careful about your expectations of how your children will feel about that partner. You can't expect your children to love that person. You can't expect your children to treat that person as a parent or as a step-parent right away. That will evolve and develop naturally as you've developed a relationship with your children naturally over time by just overcoming challenges as they come together.
Also to that point, Robin, if you're with a person who, let's say there's some resistance from the kids,
you
have to then have that conversation with that person, and hopefully the person you've chosen is mature enough to understand, hey, this must be difficult for your kids or my kids. How can we work through this together? As it goes back to that maturity, that emotional maturity. Well, they'll get over it, or they'll whatever. That's not the approach to take. So that would be another red flag for me if I was with somebody who said, well, we got to do this. This is what we want. Forget about them. Because there are those people out there. That would be a red flag for me, and that would be a deal breaker for me. My kids know, listen, I wrote a blog on unconditional love, and I truly believe that the only unconditional love exists between a parent and a child. I mean, that's just my personal feeling. Like my kids, I'm going to love them no matter what, whether they turn out the way I expect them to or not.
the opposite direction.
It's not about that. I want them to be happy, and I'm going to love them unconditionally. Even if they're not loving me or liking me at the moment, I'm going to love them. I don't know that that can exist between two. Well, look at the divorce rate. First, second, and third divorces. It tends to get worse. I mean, what I've seen, 50, 65, 73% on third marriages. So that unconditional love, in my opinion, really can only exist between a parent and a child.
So that means that people don't learn from their mistake. If the second and third marriage, no, I mean, if the second and third marriage is actually increasing in percentage of divorce,
they didn't do the work.
They just didn't
In
do the work.
between.
Then
No, that's
Like
very
you said,
true.
they didn't do the work.
Yeah.
And so they brought the same puzzle piece to the table.
That's right, Rob.
And look what
73%
happened,
of the population didn't do their work then.
Yeah.
It's
Of the
incredible.
second and third marriage.
The definition of insanity.
Yeah, repeating the same thing over and over again,
is,
expecting
yeah.
different
Over and over
results.
and over again.
It's hard work. It's hard,
It is hard work,
And so to work with someone outside of yourself to keep you accountable to the process is hugely important. Because doing it on your own takes a long time and it's
discipline.
Very discipline, yes.
Yes.
And it's very, very difficult.
Like going to the gym and working out
Yeah,
every single day.
it's the same thing. Like, I mean, I had to hire a personal trainer myself because I knew that I wasn't going to be committed to that. And it's like, for my journey to get to the place where I am now, to even begin coaching and things like that, it was a long, hard journey. And it's like I knew conceptually the things that I had to do and the woman that I wanted to be, but how to develop into that, it was like, oh my Lord, like, how do I get there? And so my experiences, I just committed myself to learning from my experiences and then readjusting myself that way, because I desperately sought someone that offered specific services that I'm offering now and didn't find it. So I figured that I had to just figure it all out myself. And it's a valuable process, you know, and so to put it in a program, you know, is helping ladies go through that hard time and remind them that it is going to be better at the end. You know what I mean? It's going to be different at the end, and they just have to trust it. And so yeah, but I did want to chime in on the children's thing because I have a teenage daughter, and that's something that I struggled with. That was part of the huge issue for me internally, dating while she was young. It was very confusing. I didn't know when, how, who, what, and it was pretty hurtful. One of the relationships that I did have, he insisted on introducing our children to each other. And I thought it was cute, you know. It took me a while to warm up to the idea. But what ended up happening was basically, long story short, it seemed, I got the impression that he used his children to
secure the relationship.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yes.
Strategy.
And so yeah, over time I realized that, and it was very bothersome. And so it made me feel like, oh man, that was a bad call on my part. I should have waited longer. But then to your point, waiting longer, you run the risk of not knowing, you know, how they're going to work with your child and everything like that. I tried waiting longer for the next relationship. And it didn't, you know, it ended up being that he was jealous of my daughter. You know what I mean? Yes. That was shared earlier. It was clear. It was like he's struggling to compete with her time. And so the meeting was kind of like weird. So it was just, I don't know. So now I was extremely anxious about that because I have to be honest, I did not figure that part out as to how long I was going to wait.
Like walking on eggshells.
Yeah, and so I just wasn't sure. And it just happened that they met each other by just pure coincidence. He was picking me up for a date, and then I had to run and change my clothes. He hasn't been to my place yet or anything. So he's waiting in the living room, and I'm back there in the bedroom changing, and then my daughter comes home from work early. And so they meet each other. And I'm like, oh, well, she already knew we were dating. It wasn't like a secret. But that's how the meeting happened. It was very natural.
So it was not staged.
Yeah, it wasn't staged. It wasn't rehearsed. Neither was prepared. And it just happened that way. And she was excited. She was just like, okay, you're getting ready for a nice date, okay? And she helped me prepare and everything like that. And so what was important for me to help me calm down through that was that they got along. you know, and that I communicated to him how important that was. Like, she needs to like you, you need to like her, like, or at least respect each other enough. Nothing's guaranteed, but at least respect each other enough to try. So far so good.
Thanks for the story.
Yeah, no
I had an
problem.
important distinction.
Yeah,
to the
please.
Kids question. I think it's about age is an important distinction here. Your kids and yours sounds as older too.
Yeah.
I think if your child is under 7 or children, I would wait longer. I would err on the side of caution there. The thing to understand about a child's understanding of the world is children are essentially myopic, meaning they think the entire world revolves around them.
Yeah.
And in a lot of maybe great ways, it probably should. The reality is, as adults, we all know it really can't. But they'll find that out sooner or later. But so it's better to find out
Hopefully
maybe a little
sooner.
later than sooner. And especially that because again, if someone like a situation where someone is trying to use the child as the glue to keep things together, you know, if they've already seen a breakup with their parent, probably, and then you bring in another series of breakups, children learn to love by the example that their parents set. And so that's foundational at an early age. Anything that happens before the age of 7 is really, you're just setting the table for that. So I would be really, really careful about that. After, you know, in teens, maybe a little bit, it's not quite as critical, I would say. I'd use the word critical. But before 7, I think it's really dicey and err on the side of caution for sure. Definitely.
I
You
would
would-
agree with
yes,
that
go
as
ahead.
well. Yeah, absolutely. I think when you have really young children, those children have a very simplistic view of what adult relationships are. And so when you do introduce a new partner to that child needs answers to the big questions. Are you getting married? Is this person moving in?
Yeah.
Are we moving to a new house?
Yeah.
They want those concrete answers. They need those concrete answers of how that's going to impact them.
And you won't
and
have
you don't
them.
have those
Yeah,
answers.
that's
If
right.
you're
That's a good
introducing
point.
somebody on a first date or a second
Yeah,
date, right?
it's just-
You had an open conversation, Nikki, with your child about the fact that you were dating, which is really helpful. Just be honest about where you are
Correct.
in your life stages, in your relationships, so that when you are ready to introduce somebody, there's some background there. There's some understanding of what purpose this person serves
Right.
in mom or dad's life. And then you do really want to err on the side of caution and make sure. And when you don't have those answers, that's okay too. Kids ask questions all the time that we don't have the answers to. It's fine to say, we haven't decided that yet. It's not time yet for us to decide if we're going to get married. We're just getting to know each other. And I wanted to make sure that this person gets along well with you
Right.
before I even think about making that decision. So it's okay to be transparent about your own process and your own decision making. You're really modeling that for your child. You're teaching your child that we do make careful decisions about long-term relationships.
Good point.
And the thing I forgot to say about that is like if there is a breakup, a lot of times a kid's perspective on that is, oh, maybe if I was better.
Yep.
They always make it about
Yes,
themselves.
that's true.
Yeah.
And so you know, they don't need to have that happen again and again and again. Because again, now you're really
Because
poisoning
the
that
kids,
well.
I think, tend to absorb the kind of relationship they have with other people. So they look at their parents. If the woman like dates so many men, they say, "Oh, this is how relationships supposed to be,"
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
and vice versa.
Right.
So then, and this, I'm not
foundation.
sure what specific age is it. Like from 7 to 10, this is when they start not really understanding the intricacies of relationship, and this is when they repeat same behavior. When they grow up, they become like their parents.
That's right.
So, and actually, Dave, you wrote in your book, you focused on the acronym called ALWAYS. Now, is it post-marriage or is it post-divorce? Or I mean, pre-marriage or is it post-divorce?
Oh, it's
Is it
definitely
applicable in both sides?
Well, I would say that post-divorce is still pre-marriage too, because you're thinking about the next one. So the always formula is something that I came up with. Essentially, I was invited on Fox Television to discuss Kim Kardashian when she got divorced from the NBA player after 72 days, and it was big news. And they wanted someone to come in and talk about it, and I didn't really. I don't know Kim, so I wasn't in a position.
Is it a good thing or a bad
She
thing?
didn't call me last night. We didn't chat about it. And so I wanted to pivot and turn it into a teachable moment, essentially. So I created this always formula. And I
What does the
basically-
acronym ALWAYS mean?
So always is about the 7 things to look for before you decide if this person is marriage material. And it's, so I may forget this in glare of light. It's about aspirations. What do you want your life to look like? Do you want similar things? You know, that's an important distinction. Links to family. Are you close to your family? You're really disconnected. You want to be kind of complementary, and we're able to work on that. lifestyle and health. Like, is one person a gym junkie and is one a junk food junkie? That's probably not going to be sustainable long term, and that's a big thing that I look at. Is it obtainable versus sustainable? You want to look for sustainable when you're talking about marriage. And then W is about wealth. Wealth. Is one a saver, one a spender? Is one got racked up credit and one, you know, never spends anything? You know, these are problems that are going to be almost you know,
coming up quickly.
not sustainable, essentially. The A is about always faithful. That's an important one. Some people are a little bit more flexible on that, and other people are all absolute fidelity, total deal breaker. And so again, you just want to be on the same page with it. The Y is about youth and children. Do you want kids? There's one person say, I've had kids, don't want kids, never want kids. These are important distinctions. And the S is about spirituality. Like, what do you believe? Is church or synagogue or something? Is it a part of your regular practice or your meditation? Do you believe in a higher power, or are you an agnostic or atheist? Yeah. So those are important distinctions to look at about lifestyle and just thinking, does this have what it takes to stand the test of time? You know, always. And that's why I came up with that thing, so I could kind of pivot and teach it. And I think it's important. Those are just key distinctions. Those 7 things, I think, make the difference between, you know, obtainable and sustainable.
Now, when it comes to the divorce part, and I know a lot of people who go through like nasty divorce, some are, like I said, scared, and you were talking about fear, about going into a new relationship, and they stay away from meeting anyone for 10, 15 years. Now, getting back after that long, I mean, is there any like memories of what happened in the past, and they will take this baggage and bring it to the new relationship? I mean, is there like a way to reboot their brain and tell them, look, every relationship is different. What are the best approach to be able to educate someone and telling them not everyone is the same, that was a bad experience, what do you do to get and move on to the next one?
Well,
Anyone.
I think your point is that in that period of time, what has that person done to get over the breakup? Have they had therapy? I mean, I'd want to know that. If you've had your head in the sand for 10 or 15 years, I'm sorry, I probably don't want any parts of you, regardless of what they look like. You know, so I'd want to know that the person, that would be the big thing for me. Have they done the work during that period of time? I have people say to me all the time, you must hate women. No, I don't, because there's no alternative for me. And you must have trust issues, which no, I don't. So, you know, my first marriage ended because of infidelity. My parents' marriage ended because of infidelity. Infidelity is a deal breaker for me. I don't think there's any reason to cheat on a person.
There's no
regardless
leverage,
of, there's just, for me, you know, and that's why. So I think if, you know, I don't have trust issues, because I look at, if somebody commits infidelity, that's their problem. That's their deficiency. Again, not that I didn't contribute maybe to the problem in the marriage, but come to me and tell me what the issues are in the relationship. I'm not a mind reader. And so I think if a person hasn't done the work, that's a huge red flag and a deal breaker for me. What have they done over that period of 5, 10, 15 years, and now they're afraid to get back out there? Why?
Right. It's your responsibility in the new relationship to be able to frame your history and your experiences for your partner. You have to be able to explain, this particular thing that happened was extra emotional for me because I had this other experience and this is how it impacted me. So I'm bringing that history into the relationship emotionally because it does make certain things more emotional for me than it would make other things. But it's on me to explain that to my new partner and to put it in context so that it's not confusing behavior, and so that my partner has an opportunity to really honor that and protect me where I might want a little bit of protection and challenge me where I might need to be challenged.
Now, Dave, I know that you were mentioning, Bob was saying that infidelity for him is always fatal. In your point of view, is this the case? Or do you agree with him 100%, or there's always room for negotiation?
Well, I think that's an individual decision. Bob's made that decision for him. And I know a lot of people agree and have the exact same. I've also been on the other side of that with clients that I've worked with, and there have been people who've been able to forgive, been able to understand, you know, it's a cathartic situation. A lot of times something that's unconscious gets brought to a head, and I've had clients that I've worked with who've been able to then go back and heal some lingering, you know, long undiscovered things and make the relationship way better. In fact, I had one client, they took almost a second honeymoon and sort of renewed their vows. And it was basically like a reboot for their relationship. So while I don't have any judgment about that, it's an individual decision about the people that are involved in the relationship. And it's about contrition too. If one person's like, yeah, I did it and I'm going to do it again,
That's right.
then yeah, that's probably, that's not
Yeah.
fixable. But if one person is like contrite and they just, you know, they're just owning it and they want to get beyond it, then that's a totally different situation, I think, in my estimation.
Can I say something to that point? It's interesting too. One of the things that I've long disagreed with is this whole concept of forgiving people for yourself. I think in that situation, in my first marriage, it ended. That was sort of her attitude was, I'm going to get over it. I deserve to be happy were some of the words used. And this is 20 years ago. I don't believe that I have to forgive a person like that who doesn't want forgiveness, doesn't think that they did anything wrong. What I do have to do when I've done is accept it. Accept that that's part of my life, that's part of my future, and I've got to process that. But the work has to be done with me. I don't really, sounds harsh, I don't really care about what that person does going on with the rest of their life. For me, it's about how do I accept it, how do I handle it, how do I learn from it, how do I grow, because Nikki talked about some of those things. Everything that happens to us is really a teaching moment, if you choose to look at it that way. And that's really, for me, how I would, how I would process that. So I don't believe in a blanket forgiveness to say, because, and I'm a spiritual guy, and so thanks for touching on, that is important for me in a relationship. Are you spiritual? And I go to church several times a week. Now, the person's with me doesn't have to do that, but they do have to believe in a higher power, and they do have to have faith in something. That's important for me. It's very important for me. But that whole concept of just blanket forgiveness versus acceptance, at least, again, that's what's worked for me. So that's how I feel about that.
I'm going to ask a very challenging question to all of you.
Yeah.
You were mentioning 20 years ago things were different than what it is now. Because now with technology, it kind of like enables people to kind of have this kind of infidelity, but it's emotional infidelity, not necessarily physical.
Yeah.
How do you compare both? If someone starts texting and she doesn't tell you about it, but she has not had the physical affair, would you compare it as same as physical infidelity?
I've heard people say it's worse. I'd love to be curious. I've heard people say that emotional infidelity, because there's that connection.
Yes, emotional
versus
connection.
if you're getting together just for sexual reasons, that something else is going on there clearly, but that the emotional tie is a lot stronger than the physical tie. Neither one are desirable in my opinion.
But is it more forgivable? But
More
Bob, is it more
forgivable.
forgivable than physical intimacy? That's the
Again,
question.
I come down really hard on that, because having lived through it twice, and Dave said about me, that's a deal breaker for me. So the forgivable thing. If a person is contrite, and thank you for using that word, I just, it's really, I don't know what I was thinking, I'm so sorry, can we work through this? My answer would be yes. Particularly if there are children involved. I don't want you guys to think I'm a hard blank.
Black or white.
But it has to be about contrition, and it has to be about a person, I had a weak moment or whatever was going on, but that person has to meet me in the middle, or 80%, whatever. I need to feel that you're really into it, because your heart's into it. You really want to work. And I admire those people, Dave, who've been able to do that. I wish I could. I was devastated. This was a person I had known since we were 16 years old. I read Good Housekeeping, and we were best friends first, and it still didn't work. So people that use that argument, they're still, you don't know somebody's, her parents were divorced, and it was ugly, and it was violent, and it was everything else. And so I swore we were solid as a rock because we had lived through those experiences as children, but I was wrong. And I didn't even have a guard up, because I thought we are so solid because we lived through it.
Any of you?
The key question is really whether it is a breach of the contract that you have in your relationship.
Yeah.
Relationships come in all different forms. We have polyamorous relationships. We have all kinds of different agreements about what fidelity really means. So if you're being honest with your partner to the extent that you've agreed to be honest with your partner, then it's much less of a breach of trust. It really depends on the individual relationship. If you have broken the contract that you have with your partner, it doesn't matter so much in what way you've broken the contract, it's that you've broken the contract, and you have to repair the trust that you have in the relationship and be able to move forward together with a new contract that reflects your new understanding of who you are as individuals. And that may mean that one person has to submit to a little more monitoring, a little more scrutiny from the other person, because that trust has been broken, that contract has been broken. But it's a matter of whether you can reach a new agreement for the relationship moving forward.
Could I add on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Good.
All right,
Ladies first.
so I love the use of the terms negotiation, contract, agreement. I love that, because that's pretty much where I settled in around my program, because I found that to be true in my personal life and in relationships. So I'm always going to go back to like before the dating, before the relationship, right? And so what typically happens if someone comes to a negotiation without any terms? You know what I mean?
So you mean any written contract, like
No,
a prenup
yeah,
kind of
like
thing?
like literally, you're coming to a negotiation and you have no terms. Oh, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just going to show up, and then the other person is prepared.
Well, then
They
we'll
have
get
all
one.
their terms. They know exactly what they want. They know what they're willing to negotiate on. What's the hard lines? They're coming that way. I bring that up, and I set that scenario up because it's been my experience with the women that I work with and myself in my past is that women, we tend to show up like, you know, let the man lead. And it's like, well, that's fine after you've assessed him, after you have used your terms to figure out if it's a good match. We have to figure out what our terms are, you know? Because what tends to happen is without that investigation, you go into a situation and that conversation never happens. Where's the line that's drawn? What do I determine to be, you know, emotional, you know, cheating? Where do I accept that my partner has female friends? Is that acceptable to me or not? You know, those type of things have to be understood within, or else you go into a situation and you end up signing up for the other person's desires, which could be okay if that's literally okay with you. Just making sure that there's a real agreement and both people have clear terms.
Dave?
I would say that situation like emotional friends, I think it's kind of a mile marker in the relationship of where you are, essentially. And I think the question is, or I'd also say it's like a sort of a cancer diagnosis. There's a cancer in this relationship, and we're going to have to do something with it. And either it's going to be fatal, and it's going to end the relationship, or we're going to go and get that treated, we're going to get that handled, we're going to, what I said earlier about maybe one of the best questions you can ever ask is, what is my role in that? Because you automatically have to say, okay, someone has stepped in to fill a role that maybe I should have provided. So this is an awakening for me. What do I want to do with that? Do I want to step in and have the role, or do I want to just abdicate the role and walk away? And that's a very personal decision that people need to stand up to or walk away from. But I think, you know, one of the things my wife and I talk about all the time also is, you know, you ask the question, do you want to be right or do you want to be in love? Very different. And so you have to just make the decision, like, am I going to grow past this? Again, I said that earlier as well. Do I want to grow past this? Do I want to step up and say, where was I not giving that? Or what else do I need, and what am I not getting? And am I communicating that effectively? I think what we were talking about earlier too, I think relationships is about, at a level, it's kind of about conditioning the behavior you want to see. And it's about saying, like, this is my love language. This is what it takes for me to feel incredibly loved. And it's okay for me to feel incredibly loved. And by the way, I want you to have that too. What needs to happen for you? Now, if two people are coming into a relationship and they're, you know, negotiating that way, I think sky's the limit. A lot of great things can happen. So it really is, it depends on where they are in the relationship. Is it fixable? Or maybe it's not. It just depends on where they are. And are they willing to do the work to get beyond it?
But after a violation of that trust, either emotional or physical,
Sure.
some people, as you mentioned, they will, like you just said, forget about it, I'll
Right.
move on. Or they say, you know what, maybe I still feel this person has, you know, true feelings for me, and we should at least discuss and figure out if we're going to move forward or not. It has to be agreeable on both parties.
Plus, look at the state of the relationship when that occurred. Maybe that was just a trigger for, and then you start thinking, well, I wasn't really happy anyway. This thing happened. That was the final straw, perhaps. And a lot of times, an affair could be that really breaks the camel's back there. Maybe other things were probably going on. Nobody was talking.
Definitely.
I think the bow around this whole thing is really communication. It all comes down to really just putting it out there, and this is how I feel, this is what I tell people all the time, you know, if I wake up, my goal is to make you happy, assuming I know what you want. There's that responsibility on your side, and yours is to make me happy. I tell people, I want you to be happy. Whether that's with or without me, we all have a right individually to be happy.
Absolutely.
And Nikki, you touched on that for your clients too. Like, this is what I want. Own what you want. It's okay to want what we want.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. So communication, all nice and
Is
neatly
key.
tied up in the bow, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to add a piece of ribbon to that bow.
Sure.
We're
Also,
almost
getting
done
help
here.
when you need it,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
And making
Absolutely.
sure that you're getting qualified help. You need to make sure that the therapist you're going to, if you're going to therapy, trying to improve your couple's relationship, is qualified as a couple's therapist. They either need to have that LCMFT after their name in Maryland, or they need to be able to show you that they've completed a specific certification in couples therapy. Therapist doesn't mean couples therapist. You really need to be able to find the specific resource that is equipped to help you with your couple relationship, not just to help you heal and grow individually.
Thank you so much. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. I would like to thank my guests for attending today's seminar. Now, their contact information will be provided on the lower third of your screen, as well as a credit at the end of the show. Now, I would like to also thank our audience for attending our seminar today, and I hope you all benefited from the panelists' great insight and advice. Again, thank you all for being here today. Now, here are a few concluding words of wisdom. How to move on. Now, you have to stop thinking that you'll be stuck in this situation forever. We tend to feel like our problems will always be there and our heart will never heal. But don't confuse a season for a lifetime. Even your problems have an expiration date. You'll change, life will move on, and things will work out. And just like the movie Titanic, your heart will go on. My name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and have yourself a wonderful journey in your search of that special someone.